Okay, thank you, Torn. Torn, by the way, you got a lot of fans out there watching the YouTube videos. They when it starts up, they all say along with me, "Thank you, Torn," because I say that at the beginning of every message after you turn that on. Anyway, we'll start the Torn fan club. You can sell T-shirts. No, I do appreciate it. Don't mean to make light of it. Okay, Torn, I want to start reading today John's Gospel in chapter 19, and I'm going to start with verse 29. John's Gospel, chapter 19, and verse 29. This week, week that's coming up in the church world is sometimes called Holy Week. It's the week preceding Easter, and Easter is all about the resurrection of Jesus, but without the death of Jesus, there's no resurrection, and so the two kind of go hand in hand. And since it's too big of a topic to talk about all at once, what I'm going to do is talk today about the death of Jesus, and what does it mean, and what are its ramifications. Why is it an important thing? Why is it necessary? And next week we'll talk about the resurrection and what are its ramifications. And really, what does it mean to you as an individual? And just a little, not to give away the punchline, if it's just the death of one man 2,000 years ago, and if it's just even the resurrection of one man 2,000 years ago, there's really no point. Yeah, it's really missing the point, and it's much bigger than that, and it's much more close to home for all of us. So today we're going to talk about the death of Jesus and what it should mean and what it does mean for each one of us. And I'm going to start reading with verse 29. This is right in the conclusion of the account of the death of Jesus on the cross, and I want to draw your attention to something very important, a couple of things very important. Here in verse 29 it says, "Now there was set a vessel full of vinegar, and they filled a sponge with vinegar, and put it on hyssop, and put it to his mouth." And by the way, let me just comment and say, when it says vinegar, this is the King James translation, and don't think of cooking vinegar. It's not that. It's not vinegar, truly. A better translation would be sour wine, or wine that had expired and turned bad. The reason it was sitting there is because that was what the soldiers bought, and that was what they drank, because they could get it cheaply. It was marked down, and it was sold cheaply because it was spoiled, because it was sour, because it was no good anymore. And so rather than, just like today, when something is, past the expiration date, they mark the price down. Same thing here. There was a vessel of wine the soldiers would have drunk. But I've used all those different words to describe it because it's very important. The fact that it's gone bad, that it's sour, that it's no good, it's important that they filled that in a sponge, and they put it to Jesus' mouth. And verse 30 says, "When Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, the sour wine, the spoiled wine, he received it. He didn't turn away from it. He took it in to himself." And there's a reason for that. Nothing done here during this crucifixion of Jesus is accidental. Everything has a meaning. Everything has a purpose. And Jesus received it. He took it because it was part of the you might say the picture of what it was that he was doing, essential for us to understand. Before I lay it out for you, this is chapter 19, and so Torrin, I want to turn back briefly to chapter 12 in John's Gospel, and this is earlier in the same day. And I want you to notice something. This is just hours before, really, what we're reading about. This is John chapter 12 and verse 31. Jesus has on his mind what's about to take place at the cross. Again, this is earlier in the day. Here's what he said. verse 31. This is John chapter 12, verse 31. He says, now is the judgment of this world. Now think about that. He didn't say thousands of years in the future will be the judgment of this world. He said now. And he's not loose with his language either. He meant that. He meant at that time, and of course he's got in mind, we're going to see in a moment, his death on the cross. And he's labeling that with this now. Now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out or thrown down. That's, of course, Satan, who was ruling after Adam's fall. But Jesus is about to change the equation. He's about to change everything. And so that's one thing. Look at verse 32. If I be lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men unto me. Now, he means that literally. Don't be distracted by the way sometimes when a song leader is leading the worship songs, they'll say, let's lift him up. Because he said, if I be lifted up, I'll draw all men unto me. I've heard that many times, implying that if we say good things about Jesus and if we sing songs about Jesus and talk about him, then somehow that is a magical magnet that will attract people to come to church or come to the gospel. And whether that's true or not, I'll set that aside, but that's not what he means here. He's not talking about praising him or lifting him up or saying good things about him or flattering him or something like that. He means literally lifted up on the cross. How do I know that that's what he means? Look at the next verse, verse 33. This he said, signifying what death he should die. So he's talking about his death on the cross. Very clearly, John wants you to know. He doesn't want there to be any mistake about it. But look at what he said is going to happen. Verse 32 again, Torrin, if you could back up for me. He said, and I, if I be lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men unto me. Now, of course, he doesn't mean males. He means mankind. He means humans, people. And what does he mean when he says, I will draw all persons, all people to me? He doesn't mean attract them later like they're going to come to the gospel. He means literally in that event of being lifted up on the cross. The word, it helps you sometimes to look into the Greek words that are behind these English words. This word for draw, when he says draw all men unto me, it's a word that's used elsewhere in the Gospels to describe, have you thought about this? The first time Jesus met Peter, and also the last time he met Peter, the same thing happened. He said, throw your nets over on this one side of the ship, and when they pulled it in, there were so many fish in the net that they couldn't carry it all. And what the text says is that they drug it, or they drew it to shore. And the word means to drag as a heavy weight, to like lift something heavy and drag it to yourself. That's what he means. He says, if I be lifted up from the earth, I'm going to, just like Peter gathered up those fish, I'm going to draw all men to me. For what purpose? He just said, for judgment. Now is the judgment of this world. He is saying that when he is lifted up on the cross, like we just read in John chapter 19, when they took that bad, that sour, that rotten, that spoiled wine, and they put it in a sponge, Jesus himself is going to become like a sponge, so to speak, and draw to himself all mankind in all of mankind's fallen state, in the state of sin, in the state of separation from God, everything wrong with humanity, including you and me and everyone else too. So let's go back to John chapter 19 for just a moment. And with that in mind, now let's read it again and then go on and make the bigger point I wanted to make. This is John chapter 19, verse 29. It says, there was set a vessel full of vinegar or sour wine, and they filled a sponge with the vinegar. Again, nothing is accidental here. This is all symbolically representative of what's happening on the cross. They put it on hyssop and put it to his mouth. When Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, the sour wine, he said, it is finished. And he bowed his head and gave up the ghost. Now, this is really important, what he says here. It is finished. So I conclude from that in this action of Jesus, in this death of Jesus on the cross, carrying the sins of all mankind, as we read later in the New Testament, he said it is finished, meaning something got finished. Or, as another translation says, it is accomplished, meaning something was accomplished. As another translation says, everything is done, meaning something got done. So the question is, what was finished? What was accomplished? What got done in this action? What got accomplished? What was it for, in other words? What did it accomplish? Well, we could, exchange ideas and speculate and come up with theories about it, but we don't need to do that. As we go on reading in the New Testament, the people that wrote the letters, especially the Apostle Paul, this is his major topic of presentation. He tells us specifically and exactly what was accomplished, what was done, what it was for, what was the purpose of it. There's lots of places where he talks about this. He talks about it constantly, really. When you read the letters of Paul, he even tells you that when he wrote to the Corinthians, for instance, he said, "When I was with you, I determined to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified." Meaning that's the only thing I want to talk about. When he was chastising the Galatians, he said, "You foolish Galatians, I presented to you the death of Jesus clearly, and how is it that you've forgotten about it?" So it's one of his main topics, and so there's a lot of passages we could read, but my favorite one is in Colossians chapter 1. So let's turn to that briefly, and I don't want to take a lot of time, but I do want to make this point, because it's actually vitally important, very important. This is Colossians chapter 1, verse 14, Torrin. And we're going to talk about what was accomplished in that death on the cross. What was it for? What did it do? What was its meaning and purpose? Here, Paul, and I'm just jumping in the middle of his one long run-on sentence, that's the way he writes. In verse 14 says, "In whom," meaning Christ. He's talking about Christ here. Listen to what he says here. This is the first point I want to make. He says, "In whom we, that is to say we believers," we means me and you the reader, me the writer, you the reader, "in whom we have redemption through His blood." Now, keep in mind that when he says through His blood, that's a reference to His death on the cross. That's a way of referring to that. He's talking about the death of Jesus on the cross. And he says, we have redemption. And then there's a comma, and it says even. Even was added by the translators. You can see it's in italics. What he really said was, "In whom we have redemption, comma, the forgiveness of sins." Now, this is really an important point, and I know it makes some people uncomfortable, and even some people get angry about it, because we've got the wrong idea in mainstream Christianity. What we think is there's individual sin, and then there's individual forgiveness. And then I sin, and then I repent, and I get forgiven. And then a little later, I have to do it again. And sin, forgiveness, sin, forgiveness, sin, forgiveness, on an isolated, individual, case-by-case basis. That's not Christianity. That is a kind of nullifying. If that's the way it is, then the death of Jesus was for no purpose. That's not what he's talking about here. Notice that he did not say, through His blood we have the potential possibility, the hypothetical possibility of forgiveness. He just said, we have redemption, comma, the forgiveness of sins. Let me explain to you what these words mean, and that'll help. The word redemption, this is a multi-syllable Greek word, and I'm going to try to pronounce it for you. Apolutrosis. Apolutrosis. Man, that is a hard one. I had to write that out phonetically so I never would remember. Apolutrosis is the word translated redemption. Here's what it means. It just means it means a release that is bought by paying a price. Now, when I look up these words, I'll just tell you this, and try to tell you what Greek words mean. What I'm most interested in is their pre-Christian usage. because I recognize that the writers of the New Testament did not make up the Greek language. In other words, these were already words that meant something before they got into the Bible. So I like to know, how is this word used in everyday language by people who are not Christians, so we don't get like a colored version of it. And in the pre-Christian Greek world, this word apolusis meant it was used to describe the freeing of slaves or of prisoners of war by paying a ransom or paying a price, or buying back property or possessions. It means that a price is paid, and the result is people are set free. Things are restored by the paying of a price. Now the word forgiveness, it's a different word. It's aphesis is the word translated forgiveness. It literally means to release, or to send away, or to let go. This word was used in the pre-Christian Greek world to describe the canceling of a debt. In other words, you're released from the debt, or the debt, the penalty in the debt is sent away, or you are let go from that obligation. So by pairing these two words, aphesis, which is translated forgiveness, and apolutrosis, which is translated redemption, Paul is emphasizing the removal of sin altogether by the death of Jesus and the consequent result, that is our release, our complete liberation from what would have otherwise been a burden or an obligation to pay the debt ourselves. What he's talking about here is not, we minimize it by imagining that there's individual sin and individual forgiveness. He's talking about universal, as a mass, as a whole, universal, proactive forgiveness of sins because of the price that has been paid. The price paid was the blood of Jesus, and the result is universal, proactive forgiveness of everybody's sins, releasing the debt for all of humanity. Didn't Jesus say, when I'm lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men unto me? He didn't say, I'll just draw the top 10% or the lucky few that are going to make it in. He said, everybody. This is for everyone. Now, I understand that not everyone knows about it, and I understand that not everyone believes it. But may I tell you something, and this gets me in trouble, but I'm going to say it anyway. Whether you believe it or not, it's true. It's true whether you believe it or not. God knows it's true. That's the main thing. God sees it that way, whether you do or not. As far as he's concerned, the debt has been paid, it's been canceled, and everyone has been released from that debt. So Paul here is saying, especially we who are Christians, who theoretically believe in this death of Jesus on the cross, what we're asking is, what was it for? What does it mean? Well, the first thing that was accomplished was, Paul says, and let me read it again, in whom we have redemption, the release from debt or obligation. We have redemption through his blood. Notice how specific he is. Did you notice that, by the way, he didn't include any action on your part at all? He could have if he wanted to. He could have qualified it, like most Christians do in their minds. He could have said, you have the potential of forgiveness of sins if you do X, Y, and Z, if you come to this kind of conclusion, if you do this, if you do that, or if you add to it this or that. He didn't even say if you believe it. Now you should believe it, because if you believe it, you get to experience the benefit. In whom we have redemption through his blood, comma, or in other words, specifically, here's what I mean, the forgiveness of sins. That's just something that is true that we have through his death on the cross. Now, I'm going to skip a little bit because I just want to keep focused on where he's talking about the death of Jesus. What did it accomplish? So I'm going to skip Torah down to verse 20, and we're going to read a little bit here. Verse 20 says, and having made peace through the blood of his cross. Now that pins it down to the death of Jesus on the cross. He says, having made peace through the blood of his cross. Let's just pause there for a moment. When he said, having made peace through the blood of his cross, he doesn't mean peace between nations. He doesn't mean peace between individuals. He doesn't mean something on that on this temporal plane at all. He means having made peace between God and humanity. Because if you go on reading, he says, by him, that is, by what Jesus did, to reconcile all things to himself. By him, I say, whether they be things in earth or things in heaven. Now, you should just ponder this for a moment, what it is that he's saying here. By Jesus, he says, by the blood of his cross, it has reconciled, and here's what he says, all things, whether they be things in heaven or things in earth. He is drawing a big circle around the universe. When he says all things, I don't know how else you interpret that. Now, I think, to be fair, what's really in his mind and what should be in our mind is people. I don't think but he did say things. So what he's saying is the universe is reconciled to God. And in that universe is you and me. So we're part of that. And the rest of the world too. Let's not leave anybody out. He has reconciled all things or people to himself by him. Notice how he keeps emphasizing that he did it. It's not See, as of yet, he has not said what our response is. Now, we know from reading Paul's letters, the proper response is we're supposed to believe it. Like Ephesians 2:8 says, by grace you are saved through faith. The proper human response is, yes, I agree with what he did, and I choose to trust in what he did for me. That is, instead of trying to be good on my own, instead of trying to be right on my own, instead of trying to be, like one person said to me, I just hope I've done enough good things so I can make it in. That's trusting in myself. We're supposed to trust in him. But he hasn't even come to that yet. He just wants you to know what he accomplished on the cross. He said he made peace. That means that God is not sitting up in heaven angry about sin, mad and put out and bent out of shape, like some Christians imagine that he is, up there like drumming his fingers on the table and thinking, those people, man, they're really making me mad now. You angels hold me back. I'd like to just burn them all up. No. Jesus, by the blood of his cross, when he drew all men unto himself for judgment, he said that. He told us that in plain language. It was satisfactory to God. As far as God's concerned, it's all taken care of. Now, he recognizes, of course, just like we should recognize, that not everybody amongst humanity knows it. See, we're supposed to be telling them that. That's supposed to be our message in the church. And we've really, if I may say so, we've really dropped the ball, because that's not the message that the church, for the most part, has delivered to the world. God's not mad, he's not upset, and let's just bring it down to an individual basis. He's made peace with you and with me as well. He's not upset with you. He's not upset with you at all. In fact, he's in love with you. And he's done this on your behalf so that there's no disqualification, so there's no obstacle, so there's no barrier between you and himself. Excuse me. By his blood, he's pretty specific about it. All things, and including all people, we're part of this universe, have been reconciled to God. Let's go on reading. Now he becomes a little more specific. He's talking to you as an individual in verse 21, you the reader. He says, and you. Now he means you that are receiving this message. So you could put your name there. And you, listen, that were sometimes or at one time alienated and enemies. Look at this language. In your mind, by wicked works, excuse me, yet now hath he reconciled. He's saying that we as individuals, excuse me, boy, that sounded terrible. I'll have to cut that out. That'll help. You and me, at one time, may have felt that we were alienated from God. And as a matter of fact, I meet people from time to time who think that they are as well. Excuse me. Boy, that's terrible. I got to quit doing that.
excuse me. And you that were sometimes alienated and enemies. I got a lot of editing to do on this video. Sometimes alienated enemies in your mind by wicked works. What he means by that is we in our own mind are conscious of our wrong actions. And we think that alienates us from God. But what we're supposed to do is replace that knowledge with knowledge of the cross and how he has already dealt with that situation, so that we no longer sense or have a feeling or the wrong impression that we are alienated and enemies because of our wicked works. Because he says, yet now hath he reconciled. How? Verse 22 tells us. Excuse me. In the body of his flesh. Notice it doesn't say anything about you and your flesh. It says in the body of his flesh. Through death, that is his death. And what's the result? To present you holy. Get this. He said, what he did on the cross, we're talking about what did it accomplish? To present you holy and unblameable and unreprovable in his sight. The word holy, I think we have an impression of what that means. I know this sounds terrible, but we'll just go and cut all that out. Holy and when you ask most Christians, if you were to ask most Christians, what does it mean to be holy? They're going to tell you a lot of behaviors, things to do and things not to do, and most of it trivial and unimportant. Well, I'm going to set that aside. I talk about that a lot. I kind of go overboard on talking about that. But let's just make the point. What makes you holy is the death of Jesus on the cross. And unblameable. Now, notice that there are two words here, unblameable and unreprovable. These are two different words in the Greek language. Unblameable is a word amosis, and it means, listen to this, without blemish, or it means faultless. It means without defect of any kind. In the pre-Christian Greek world, it was used to describe a person of blameless character. It also meant something or someone that is beyond reproach. Now, he's using this word to describe you as a result of what Jesus did on the cross when he... See, we just kind of flippantly say he died for our sins on the cross. Well, what does that really mean? That means he removed it as a factor. And the result is that he has put us, who theoretically believe in that, we're in a position of what Paul calls blameless, amosis, without blemish, faultless, no defect of any kind, no moral stain or disqualifying fault. It means more than forgiveness. Get this. It's something much greater and more than forgiveness. It means that as believers we have been literally transformed into a state of favor and acceptability. It's not just that, see, this is what's so wrong with this idea of sin and forgiveness, individual sin, individual forgiveness. It leaves you in the same state, that kind of mindset. Now, God doesn't see it that way, but we do. We're wrong to see it that way. It also nullifies the death of Christ on the cross, because if you think it's individual sin, individual forgiveness, you're back in a position before Jesus even went to the cross. That's how it was in the Old Testament. You're in effect kind of nullifying what he did on the cross. What he did on the cross was he procured absolute and universal forgiveness, proactive on the part of God. So this word unblameable means more than forgiveness. It means we've been transformed into a state of acceptability. Back when we used that big long word that I had trouble pronouncing, which describes the removal of guilt, that's what was translated forgiveness. This word amosis describes the consequent state that we are in, because all guilt and all sin and all the stain associated with sin has been removed from us because of the death of Jesus. Now there's another word, unreprovable, a completely different word. Anekletos is what this word means. These are really hard words, by the way, and I had to write down the phonetic translation to help me pronounce these things. Here's what it means when it says unreprovable in his sight. It means free from even the possibility of accusation. It's not just that you are forgiven, but that there's now no basis for even bringing a charge. You can't even bring a charge into court. It means a standing before God in such a way that no accusation, present or future, can ever be brought. Now, there's an implication here that is looking to the future. Now, you know, a lot of people, especially Christians who don't understand what we're talking about, I think it's almost like a universal Christian fear of the last judgment and whatever that may mean. This means that even in a future case of that kind, there's not even the possibility of charges being brought because of Jesus' death on the cross. That's what unreprovable means. Not just that you're forgiven, but there's not even the possibility of charges ever being brought. It's talking about our standing before God. Notice in this verse, he even says that, in the body of his flesh through death, to present you. That means to present you, or that you stand before God. In the King James world, the King James translation from which this is, when this was translated, if you came before the king, you didn't just come knock on the door and say, "Hey, king, I'm here." Somebody had to present you. These guards are at the door, and so they would announce, "So and so, I present so and so." Then you come in before the king. That's what he's talking about. We are presented to God in a state of not just forgiven, but even the possibility of charges. There's not even a possibility of bringing accusation. That's how powerful, that's how great the death of Jesus on the cross is. That's how big it is. So here's a question for you. Why is Paul writing this down in this letter? Why he's writing it down? The Apostle Paul knew this. I wonder sometimes if the thought ever crossed his mind that, I understand how things are, and I could just kick back and enjoy my life and know and feel this sense of security and know how big it is, this redemption that we have, and I feel completely at peace. I'm not satisfied, though, with just me knowing it, me, the Apostle Paul, that is. Everybody else needs to know this as well, so they can enjoy this sense of security and God's favor, and the fact that, look at what he's done to bring you to himself and to put you in this position of absolute favor. You can place all of your trust in him, knowing that he's going to work it all out for your good because of what he has done. This gave the Apostle Paul the kind of confidence that he could just face anything. He was beaten at times, and he was shipwrecked, and all these bad things happened to him, but he said, what he said in the face of that? None of these things move me. He said, go ahead, just, whatever you're going to do it, but none of these things move me, because I'm going to finish my course with joy. That's what he said when he said that, none of these things move me, because I know something, and I want you to know it too. And I think that's why he's writing this down in this letter to the Colossians, because he knew what this death of Jesus on the cross, what it really did, what it really procured, what it accomplished. And he wants all of us who are reading this as well to know it as well. Okay, I think that's all I got today. Next week we're going to talk about how the resurrection of Jesus affects you. Now I see that Ethan is here. And Ethan